Good morning. Welcome to this webinar today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm, and we're pleased that you're able to join us for this New Jersey MEP webinar sponsored part of the Crisis Coach webinar series in 2017. Today we'll be discussing about predictive intelligence and how to create a robust intelligence network. We'd like to have you as our friend on Facebook, Firestorm Solutions there. On Twitter, we're Firestorm Soul, and the hashtag for this session is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We would like to remind you the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion. This product should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel, and this information should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. The New Jersey MEP has been our host and co-sponsor of this series now for several years. I understand Joe Caratinoto is out traveling today, but we do have our very own Blair Neville with us. Blair, would you like to say some things about the New Jersey MEP?
Great. Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it. For those of you on the phone that may not know about the MEP, they've been a great supporter of Firestorm and the idea of business continuity and preparedness for their clients. The New Jersey MEP is an organization here in New Jersey that is sponsored out of the federal government NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, and their role in life is to help and enhance the manufacturers here in New Jersey. So they partner with their clients on things like sustainability, efficiency, lean training, Six Sigma, Green Belt, those types of things, but they also are very aware of how important business continuity and preparedness is to sustainability of any company. So they've partnered with us here at Firestorm to bring those services and to their clients. So again, we've been partners for probably about 2 years now, and they've been great supporters of these webinars and this training. So again, I'd like to thank them for all their effort and their support of us and our services. Bill?
Thank you, Blair. Our presenter today is Karen Masullo. Karen is the Chief Intelligence Officer and the Executive Vice President of Firestorm. She has extensive training and experience, knows how to monitor, to set up all kinds of social media programs. She knows about all of the various kinds of social media avenues. Over to you, please, Karen.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. And thank you, Blair, and thank you, everyone, for attending today. Those of you that are outside of the state of New Jersey, welcome as well. If you would like to implement a webinar series for your organization, your manufacturing environments or associations, we have some information for you at the end of the session. You can always reach Blair through webinars at firestorm.com or bneville@firestorm.com, or any of us through our website at firestorm.com. Also, if you have any questions throughout the session, you can use the GoToWebinar tool, chat area, dashboard, whatever it's called, on the right side of your screen. It should be on the right side of your screen. There's a little chat area there. We may not get to all of your questions, but we certainly will in a follow-up email after the session, and are happy to chat with you at any time. I'd also like to remind you that if you are on this webinar and are a member of the New Jersey Manufacturers Association, we are happy to sit down with you for an hour at no fee and conduct a very high-level co-facilitated assessment of your high-level risks so that we can make sure you're moving into the next quarter of 2017 in a secure position. So again, you can just reach out to us, and Blair will be happy to schedule that for you and move that forward. And I'm sitting here today with Roxanne the Wonder Dog, so if you hear a bark in the background, that's what it's about. And again, thanks for your participation. Today we're going to be talking about basically what keeps you up at night and how you can go about shutting down at least some of that worry by approaching your risk in a Predict.Plan.Perform with a Predict.Plan.Perform methodology. And, you know, when I was thinking about what we wanted this webinar to be this month, we're following through in our series. When we started the year, we did an overview of risks and what the risk territory and landscape looked like for 2017. And we talked about doing a high-level assessment of your risks and making sure you had your program at least started in place, that you were asking the right questions. If you are senior leadership, that you're in the loop of what's going on. If you're reporting to senior leadership, that you're in the loop and keeping them in the loop and have a seat at the table. So everybody is aware of what the risks are and what the responses are. We don't want to be working in silos. And then we talked about behavioral risks and how they impact an organization. And along with those behavioral risks, then comes what we're doing today. And that is predictive intelligence. And what is predictive intelligence? And what is building an intelligence network? Predictive intelligence is a term that's used by marketers, and we're not using it in that context. So if you've heard the term, I want to assure you that we're not talking about observing behaviors in order that we might understand how to sell people more stuff, although selling people more stuff is not a bad thing. We want to look at predictive intelligence in a way that lets us know if there are signs of behavioral threats or risks to the people and property under your purview. Then, in order to help bolster predictive intelligence that we receive, we want to make sure that we have people involved so that we have a robust intelligence network. An intelligence network is made up of people and technology. So we have face-to-face relationships, and then we expand those relationships into the social and digital world so that in the case of a crisis, we can communicate and receive communication as quickly as possible through channels where we have already developed relationships. So let's talk about that in a little bit more depth. And we're going to look at some examples that are in the news. Sadly, it's been a very busy week for that type of information. And we're going to look at how intelligence can either help or hinder the world today. I think we all know that we have a lot of things that we're concerned about in our organizations. Whether in a small manufacturing environment, there are 7 of you working on a shop floor, or you have multiple warehouses across the country with thousands of employees, we have some pretty common concerns. We want to make sure that there's no loss of life on our property. We want to keep people safe. And those people aren't just our employees. They include vendors, visitors to our property, customers, clients. So we want to make sure we're working in a safe environment, certainly. We worry about natural disasters. And, you know, in the New Jersey environment, we may be looking at hurricanes and storms and flooding and a variety of other events. An ice storm can come through and knock out power, or we can have a challenge with the poisoning or the contamination of the water that you use in your manufacturing processes, and that can really create some challenging issues as far as business continuity is concerned. So natural and man-made disasters, certainly. You can have injuries on your property. You might have a major supplier interruption, or the supplier of your supplier has an interruption. So it's really important that you're aware of what's going on in the world. If you have parts for your manufacturing environment that come from one part of the world, and that part of the world is experiencing a significant man-made or natural disaster, do you have a backup for your supplier? Does your supplier have a backup? How is that going to affect your ability to deliver on time to your clients? And if you're not aware via some sort of intelligence network that you've created of what's going on in the world, everything is going to be a surprise. And we know that's not a good position for you to be able to function in. You might be in an area that is experiencing a high level of communicable illness, an epidemic or a pandemic of some type. If 45% of your employees did not show up because of a flu or because they were afraid of getting the flu or some other communicable or insect-borne disease or something like that, would you be able to continue to function? Would you be able to continue your operations? Have you planned for that? And have you planned for not only that, but what would happen if something was happening in another part of the world or another part of the country where your major client or customer is, and for some reason it affected your client's business and thus affected their ability to be a customer of yours? Are all your eggs in one basket? Is your risk centered on one customer so that the loss of that customer member might mean a significant reduction in your own business? And then we have to look at public and brand damage events, and I think we're going to look at a pretty simple example of that was in the news this week. And then hacking, leaks, data breaches, that goes with the public and brand damage event. You know, I think we all sit here and when we say we know there are two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that don't know they have been hacked. And no matter the size, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to secure your data, it's something that you must be conscious of, aware of, conscientious in following up on. And so I'd like to make sure that it's a part of your strategy going forward in at least the second half of the year, if not already. And we are going to have a spotlight session coming up, I believe, in June. We'll get information for you on other approaches you can take to help secure your organization. And then we always have challenges with maybe a senior leadership failure where the CEO of the company or a senior person in the company might be accused, or something happens, or there's an investigation, and it suddenly creates a mass exodus of employees from your organization. It could affect a mass exodus of your clients. We have to plan for those things and think through the scenario, although nobody wants to. And certainly terrorism is a concern. And those are just a few of the top-level concerns that we think about as we think through the different scenarios that we must be aware of. And more important, I want everybody on the call today to take a moment to think about what the worst thing is that could happen to your organization today. And when you think about that, ask the more important question, which is, could you handle it? If your number one client today called and said, we just filed for bankruptcy, I know we have $100,000 in outstanding receivables to you, but we're not going to be able to pay that, talk to you later, what would you do? What would your next step be? And as you think through that, go ahead and narrow it down to those top level risks. And at least let's start there with your teams. And if some of you are attending today with your teams and you've gone through these scenarios, then start looking at various aspects of how one of these top level crises might unfold. When we did a survey of more than 900, I think it was about 940 Firestorm businesses, clients and other folks in our community, and we asked what the #1 crisis event for their organization would be. Violence, an incident of violence was certainly a concern, but cyber attack and natural disaster were the two really big ones. Does that concur with you? Is that a concern for you? Loss of life event was down 6%. Sorry, I'm getting an echo. Blair,
Karen, this is actually I just unmuted Karen. I wanted to make a quick statement. That's probably where you picked up the echo a little bit. To your point, I just would ask the attendees, when you think about these items that are on the screen, there's one thing that I've noticed in working with the client and my clients is that a lot of these, when they happen, you may be able to survive or deal with the natural disaster, or you can have your protection against a cyber attack. What ends up happening a lot of times is that there's a ripple through there's a ripple through an industry sometimes, and a lot of these come back to supply chain issues, whether you can get the materials or get the people or get the information that you need. So a lot of times people focus on the actual event and can we deal with the event, and forget sometimes that there's sort of a chain reaction that happens with maybe your clients or your customers, and that ripple effect is, I'm unprepared to deal with it, and the consequence of that. And so it's not just this specific event. You have to kind of look a layer deeper and say, well, that natural disaster, I can weather it with and I can deal with that, but what if my supplier who's supplying me with data, or what if my supplier who's supplying me with material is affected greatly? So it becomes a supply chain issue, and it's something to think about. Like I say, just take a step deeper into the thought process.
And thank you very much, Blair. And it's a really, I'm sorry, I'm getting that echo again, so if you could mute, that'd be great. So that's part of why we build up an intelligence network, so that we are linked into what's going on in the world, and news and events that can affect us, both digitally and via the face-to-face interactions that we have with our community and our associations. I'm really thrilled to be giving this presentation for an association that works with association members to help keep you resilient. There are a lot of companies or organizations or manufacturers that are sort of out there on their own. So I've heard of an organization certainly where you can go and you can get training and you can get resources, and so that's a great start. The NJMEP is part of your intelligence network. Now, when you think about whatever the crisis is that you've identified as the absolute worst thing that could happen to your organization today, then I want you to think about who do you need to contact to discuss. So if we were going to talk about a communicable illness event, or maybe you have trains that come into your facility, and or you're a port, and suddenly there was a disruption to transportation, and there was no way that the goods and services that you use in order to create your goods and services could get to you. Who would you need to contact immediately? What are your alternative plans? Is manufacturing going to occur in a different facility? Who needs to know about that? How are all those changes going to be made, and who will be affected? Employees, clients, your senior leadership. Does your CEO know? Does your C-suite know? If your CEO is walking from one building to another in another state, and someone puts a camera and a microphone in front of them and it says, why did you just close a plant and put 3,000 people out of work? Is he going to really understand, has he been prepped or she been prepped on what the conversation is about? So we really want to think through the nuance of these types of things as best we can. And then if we are in senior leadership, break it down into its simplest pieces. And if you're reporting up into senior leadership, make it as simple as possible so that it doesn't get lost because it's overly complex. So what kinds of things can happen that are a big surprise to everybody? The City of Dallas outdoor warning sirens system. I don't know if you saw this, but can you imagine if for 2 hours in your area the sirens went off, every single siren went off. It was the Dallas system was hacked. Someone hacked every tornado siren in Dallas for 2 hours. Now, I mean, there's a lot more than just, hey, somebody needs to turn that off, right? We've got a major issue in that someone was able to hack into this system. How simple was that? And we've seen this happen in Dallas before. We've seen road signs and lots of other things that were hacked into, but this is pretty major. If they are able to activate them, they are able to deactivate them. If something like that could happen in your facility, on all your facilities, on your property, in your community, if it happened in your community, would you know who to connect with? Would you know who to talk to? Are you connected? Now, a lot of people thought this was, you know, okay, let's make light of this. It's funny. The reason the sirens went off was because Mothra was battling Godzilla. There was a zombie apocalypse. But overall, this was a pretty serious crime and a very serious event when all 156 of those sirens sounded, and people were really frightened. Let's talk about something else. How about last year when the crane collapsed across the tap? Are you coming in again, Blair?
Yes, Karen, I just wanted to comment on your point is that your awareness, we're talking today about that intelligence level. I just pose a question to everyone on the phone, is that how many people really understand who is in their building or in their complex? So if you're in an industrial park, I don't know if we might have some law offices on the line here, who's on your floor in your building?
We're going to look at that too. We're going to look at that via map. That's a really good point, Blair.
I'm jumping ahead, is because an event in that company. Well, I'll save my comments when you get there then, but I'll just raise that as a point. So let's continue.
It is a really important point too. So let's talk about when the crane collapsed on the Tappan Zee Bridge. Now, there was already construction going on the bridge, and sadly, people were hurt in this incident. But as you think through this, what would happen if a major transportation system to your organization, to your facility, were suddenly out of commission? How would that affect your business? If you have an entire shift that suddenly can't get to work, have you planned for that? Do you know how you would work with that over a longer period of time if that major transportation route were out for a while? And I think we've seen a very good example of that. I was talking to Jim Satterfield, our CEO, recently, and he called me. We talked at like 6 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning, and I said, my God, what time did you hit the road? Because he was calling me from the road. He said, I had to leave at 3:30 because of that chunk of 85 that's missing. He said, I knew if I left any later, I would start hitting the alternate rush hour that has now been created because of this major artery closure. And he said, in order for me to get to the state that I'm going to today, I knew I had to take this roundabout way. So what if that happened? And how many times have we sat around and said, gee, what would happen if a piece of the highway just burned to the ground? I've never had that conversation. I didn't know it could happen this easily. The last time that we saw anything like this was during an earthquake in California. So this was a really significant event and a real disruption to not only the travel, but look what's behind there. There's an industrial area behind there. There's a rail system. I mean, there's a great deal that's been affected by this. So you have to think that through. And at one point in time, I can't remember if this was a late 2015 or early 2016, we had a whole town that was evacuated because a train carrying crude oil derailed in Lynchburg, Virginia, and created a massive health risk because of the smoke, the heavy smoke, the we've seen this happen in many places. Canada sadly lost a whole town. What if that town housed all of your employees, the majority of your employees, one of your key businesses, one of your key customers, one of your key suppliers? So again, we need to know not only what's going on, but have thought through what has happened, what we can plan for, and what our contingency plans are for that. Now we're off to Blair's point, and that is the first part of creating your predictive intelligence is to understand what's around you. What's the closest building to you? What does that building house? Who's behind you? Who's in front of you? Are you in a multiple tenant property? Do you know the other tenants? Do you know what the shelter in place procedures are for the facility? Do you know what the evacuation procedures are for this facility? And once you know those things, have you connected with these people or the properties via social accounts or digitally, so that if something should occur and it's just you running down some stairs in the building with your cell phone, could you at least send a tweet to the property management company and say, hey, what's going on? All the sirens are going off. All the alarms are going off. There's a problem with the structure of the building. There's a problem with the building next door. How quickly could you get in touch with fire and rescue? If you had to get a message out by connecting to all of these different social and other accounts, you also have the ability to communicate immediately to a large constituency. If you're in a rural area and it takes a while for first responders to get there, are there other connections you can make? Can you evacuate your employees to a nearby facility? And is it possible, if you can't get to a phone, can you somehow send a message in some other way for help? So I really want to emphasize to you that the face-to-face communications and meetings that you make with people are critically important, and then we want to take those a step farther into the social realm or the digital realm so that these connections can help you in times of good and crisis. And then we're going to add and layer on to that a little bit of predictive monitoring of those and other accounts so that we can help keep your people and property safer. Blair, do you have a comment?
Yeah, yes, Karen. I was just going to say that we just recently were working with a client that it was an office environment. So when we went through the, they were in an industrial park, and when we went through the analysis with them, the idea of a hazmat, caustic chemical response plan, and then some steps to deal with that was just not on their table because, of course, it was an office environment. They didn't have to deal with that, except they not backed up to, but the next building was a business that did some very detailed plating. They, on the other hand, had extremely caustic chemicals. So again, once we did a survey of the area, we found out that you had better be prepared for this. If they have an event, you need to know how to respond to that, which is mainly get out. But they were unaware. They just didn't quite understand who was in the complex with them. So a couple of simple questions makes a big difference.
It's a critical point, Blair. It's a great example. It's a very important point, and you need to know your neighbors. I mean, it seems like such a simple thing, but it's a very important part of keeping your people, your employees safe, but also the viability of your business, right?
Yeah, and I will say that when we spoke to the neighbors, they were a very buttoned-down organization, had some good plans in place. So it ended up nothing more than really a conversation and an understanding, and a little bit of help with our client to just make sure that they understood, if these events happen, here's what you need to do, where initially they just wasn't in their mindset. So again, it's not always a large plan or a heavy cost to address these issues. It just can be simple as a good conversation and just an understanding of what the elements are.
That's really a great example. And the other thing I want to say on this is we worked with one client where the actual first notice that they got that there was a problem at a neighboring facility was via a tweet from the neighboring facility. The neighboring facility put out a tweet that said, we've had an event at our XYZ plant, more details, shortly. And a boiler had exploded, and there was a fire, and there were some other things that had happened. But that was the first way they knew, was through a tweet, not through news or not through a phone call or anything else. They just happened to be monitoring as a part of their general social media monitoring that account and its public messages and picked that up. So that's what we're trying to express to you folks, is that there are some very simple ways that you can go about keeping yourself in the know, and we're certainly happy to help give you the high points of what those are. And you want to understand if your neighbor's location is a risk, or if a location near you is a target. And again, transportation risks that might be associated, and then knowing your evacuation points should something occur. And we want to make sure, and this is a longer, more complex conversation that we'll have in a different webinar later in the year, but we don't always want to evacuate everyone to a single place that's the same single place we've been evacuating everyone to for the last 6 years. Because if I'm a disgruntled former employee or customer or someone planning domestic violence and I visit your place of work or your facility with harm, with intent to harm people and property, and I know that if I create an evacuation situation, I'm going to have all 2,000 of your employees in one spot outside the building, that then is my secondary target, which was actually the primary target. So you really have to think through how these things change and are not predictable, but can still keep people in your facility safe. By creating this robust network of people in combination with physiological awareness and monitoring through technology tools, if an event occurs, you're going to be in a better position to receive or send communication effectively. And that's what helps keep people and property safer. Now, more important, you might be able to see a crisis coming and avoid it altogether. We don't know that for sure. We can't see every event before it occurs. And recently there was a very sad event of a former employee, an employee who was terminated from a gym facility, who came back and who murdered 2 people in the facility. Now, we don't know for sure if we could have looked at this person's social media, at their Facebook post, at their Twitter account, at other secondary Facebook pages that actually we surfaced that the person had, that may have given an indication that there was a problem, there was growing rage, there was anger, there might have been other behavioral cues that might have allowed some early intervention. Maybe not. I certainly don't want to in any way indicate we're blaming victims or anything like that. But there may have been. Far too often, we sit back a week after a crisis or event has occurred and said, oh my God, all the signs were there. Now, whether those signs and you take them to someone and they are acted upon, that's a second level of effort that's required. But right now, we really want to make sure that we're teaching employees and clients and customers to say, if you see something, if something's going on, let's say something, let's talk about it. Let's not assume it's already being taken care of, because every crisis is a human crisis. Every person, someone's son, someone's daughter, and we want to protect those people that are our responsibility as best we can. By utilizing what we call predictive intelligence, that's sitting down, looking at all of the different scenarios that could occur to our organization, and then saying, how can we look at public information, social accounts? How can we look at things that are publicly posted, not privately posted, and aggregate that data to look and see if there are trends or problems or plans that we can either predict what behavior may occur, or if a crisis does occur, we can leverage in order to help us. Because there's no guarantee that every threat's going to be captured. But this type of monitoring is part of an overall crisis prevention program. Because there are threats we can identify before they occur. We were working with an energy company at one time, and it was a great group of folks. And in the downtown of the city we were in was where the headquarters were for the energy company, and they had 5 or 6 floors in a building, and it was a robust, interesting group of people. And then in a rural area about 22 miles outside of town, they had all of the engineering team in a secure facility, and they called it the Brainiac Barn. And what was going on was the Brainiac Barn was the target of an eco-terrorist group. And they were really concerned about how they could somehow predict events that might occur. And so we were able to look at social media and not predict every time, but a lot of the planning that was going on to target that facility was being discussed on social media. We were able to find the name of the facility, the address of the facility at different times being discussed. We're going to meet here at 6 a.m. in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. So at least that gave them a leg up in order to increase security, increase the perimeter, expand the perimeter as need be to protect the people and property at that facility. Some of the tools we use have actually been used for much more public national events. During the Boston Marathon bombing, we use one tool that allows us to go back to a very specific time in history and see what occurred at that time. One of the tools we used was used by the Boston Police Department, the FBI, and others to analyze the images, photos, and videos that were taken of that moment of the bombing during the race itself. So we're using sophisticated tools developed by people who are really committed to keeping people and property safe. Now, what we're going to see is a little disturbing, and I know that you've all sadly probably seen some of this that has evolved. And I know Blair has some comments on this as well. So let's just go ahead and, for those of you that may be unaware, do a high-level, sort of a high-level analysis of what might have gone on. And we're not going to make any judgments, and we don't know all the details. And remember, everything you might learn about a crisis at first is probably wrong. But from what we understood, and I want everyone on the call right now to think about this. What is the first way you might learn about a crisis in your organization? If the first way you might learn about a crisis in your organization is a viral video on Facebook Live or Periscope or a post on Twitter, you really need to up your social monitoring game, right? If that's how you're going to learn about the crisis. So what we think happened, or what we saw happen, was that someone posted a video, and I believe they were using Facebook Live, and the passenger said United Airlines had overbooked the flight. In that post, they were randomly selecting people to kick off so the standby crew could have a seat. Now, again, we're getting this from someone who may or may not be right. So remember, everything you learn about a crisis at first is probably wrong, and there's going to be a grain of truth going through, but let's not issue statements or make analyses based on secondhand information we haven't verified. The man is a doctor and has to be at the hospital in the morning. He didn't want to get off. We are all shaky and so disgusted. So according to this person, passengers were told at the gate that they'd been overbooked. They were offered money, you know how they do, vouchers in a hotel, but nobody volunteered. The passengers were then selected by computer from this flight from Chicago to Louisville. And then we saw the video come out. We also saw the person who was forcibly removed from the flight somehow come back onto the flight, bloodied, disoriented. It was very difficult to tell whether the person had been disoriented prior to. So it was a very confusing situation. These are stills from the videos, and there were so many people with video devices with cell phones on this flight that there is video from almost every angle of what was going on. The Chicago transit officer who was involved in the primary forcible removal has been suspended. The sheriff's office put out a statement immediately that was based upon some data that was not correct, and Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United Airlines, put up a statement. This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologize for having to re-accommodate these customers. I really need to stop right there. Whenever you are apologizing for anything other than just making your apology, if you can't just say, we apologize, then saying we apologize with a caveat is a very dangerous thing. Is that what we're apologizing for, re-accommodating? And is that how we re-accommodate? We just grab somebody by the arms and drag them down the aisle. So this was at the time, okay, this was April 10th at 12:27 in the afternoon. This was just after PR Week had awarded Munoz as their Communicator of the Year. Since that time, there's been a petition for the removal of Munoz. I don't know if those actually do anything. And Blair, you had a lot of comment. You had some insight that you wanted to share on this.
Sure, Karen, thank you. There's a whole lot of things. One of the areas that we spend a great deal of time on here at Firestorm is helping companies with crisis communication plans. And this is a perfect example of a company that either doesn't have a crisis communication plan. I find it hard to believe considering the size of the company and who we're talking about here, or somebody who just ignored their plan. I don't know which it is, but whatever it is, or maybe it was just a bad plan. But fundamentally, when we look at crisis communication plans for companies, there's a few golden rules that we adhere to and advise companies not to do. Number one is, until you know all the facts and until you're sure about what the situation is, don't say anything. This is the classic example of Oscar Munoz trying to get out in front of it. When I do some training with clients, I often hear that, well, we have to get out in front of this. We have to get in front of the whole thing. The press is going to say something about it. The reality is that there are so many errors in the first couple of statements to the point of the passenger was disruptive and belligerent. Now we see, after we get the details, that doesn't appear to be the case. The fact that the flight was overbooked, well, that wasn't the case either. The flight wasn't overbooked. They were just trying to put 4 of their employees onto the flight to head them back to a new location. So when you start seeing those mistakes, you kind of wonder, well, what other mistakes happened? What were the other areas that they misjudged? So it just opens you up, opens the company up for more questions, as opposed to the police and the authorities had control of the situation at the time, maybe poorly, but they had it. And all that United had to do was simply say that the police and the authorities are in control, and simply ask questions of them, and when we get all the data, I'll come out with a statement, which he just did. And the recent statement today was a good statement. It looked like it was well prepared, and it appears he went to some professionals who got it done properly. But now they're backtracking and backpedaling from two statements which were riddled with errors, and are probably going to cause some blowback. I mean, already the stock price has dropped to $255 million. So that's a pretty costly mistake for any CEO to make. And if I was a shareholder, a significant shareholder, you'd be kind of questioning that judgment of, you know, A, why the statements were made from him without the data and without the correct information, and B, you know, as I said, as we learn more, we'll understand the reaction. But if your value of your company dropped $250 million because of it, you'd have to question whether you know, the leadership team really knows what they're doing. And it just goes back. I was just going to say, summarize. It just goes back to having a plan and working a plan, and understanding that within a crisis, it's a time when you don't want to be making decisions on the fly. You want to be making decisions with the best data that you have, and with professional help.
Thank you, Blair. And I do want to let you folks know on the call, and I do apologize, because of some things that evolved over this week, we're going just a little bit over on time today. So for those of you who who scheduled the exact 45 minutes, I apologize for going over. And a brief of the session will be available on the Firestorm website within about 48 hours at firestorm.com/briefs. We have just a couple more sort of chunks of information to look at, so we're going to go just about 5 or 6 minutes over. Again, I apologize, and Blair, thank you so much for the insights on that, because I think it's just a really typical example of something that happens and how we need to be aware. Now, you may not be an international company that if something happened at your facility, it would go viral and there would be 19 million mentions, but perhaps, you know, 1,900 mentions is enough in a negative way to affect your business. And so you must have some type of monitoring available so that you can both predict threats before they occur, and then when they do occur, manage the information. More important, you need to also have some relationship with the people involved, with the human beings involved, so that you are not just trying to communicate technologically or digitally, but you're also face-to-face having communications and meetings with people. So again, it's face-to-face and digital, because before an event, we really want to be able to spot what might go on and then connect with the right people to see if we can do something about that. Last month, we talked about our behavioral risk threat assessment program. And this is a good example of, you know, someone who posted threats on social media, whether you're a school or a business. This was a very clear, I greatly affected the lives of the families ruined, but I'm sorry. This was his last post that he made before he went to his school, which is also a place of work, and shot and killed the assistant principal and the principal during an attack. We saw that this week, very sadly, in San Bernardino. We saw that this was a domestic situation that spilled into the workplace, which happened to be a school, and a child who was standing behind the victim became a victim as well. We have seen where domestic violence visits the workplace, and whether it's in the facility or whether it's in the parking lot, it's something that we may be able to predict if we understand what's going on. I'm not quite sure how the gunman in this situation got past that front desk, but I can envision it. So can you. Let's say you are estranged from your spouse, and let's say your spouse, who everyone in the organization knows, who reception knows, who security knows, comes to the front desk and says, hey, it's my husband's birthday. I'm going to surprise him, okay? Would you let that person in? I want you to think about that. That's what's important. This is a post by the shooter. The truth of the matter is, when people get fed up, people get killed. Now, this is taken out of context. This was in another context, but it does show an underlying point of view. The reason we do what we do is because every crisis is a human crisis. Jonathan Martinez didn't have a chance. So let's make sure we find threats through creating a predictive intelligence approach so that we can keep the people and the property in our purview safer. Every day, we're monitoring social public posts. We see people being bullied at work. We see people afraid to go to work. We see people sabotaging equipment at work. We see people sabotaging other people, equipment, their senior leadership, and their companies. And this is all public information. We're not looking at anything being shared privately. But all we're doing is aggregating information to give it to you. And then we're able to serve it up to you in very simple tools that we can do for you or you can do on your own. We use what we consider best of class. There are certainly other tools available, but you're able to see it in a very quick snapshot. And you're able to drill down and see if there are real threats that you need to address today. Because while technology is used to connect all of this, it's the people that we're connecting that actually make the intelligence network for you. This has to do with bullying behavior and threats that are clear or not so clear. Really, everyone on this call today, if you knew that there was someone in your facility that was afraid to come to work because they were being bullied, what would you do about it? Sit down with your team and discuss it. Well, that's an HR issue. Is it? How do you know how HR handles the issue? What if the person who wrote the procedure and the policy isn't in that day? What if they're out sick? Does the rest of the team know how to handle it? What if no one can get to that person? What if someone in your facility becomes so angry that they take your foreman hostage in a closed, locked room? What are you going to do then? We're going to call 911, but then what happens? Do you evacuate? Do you lock down? Do you really know? Discuss it. Bring people in who can help you understand. So I just want to let you know that, again, I appreciate your joining us today. We know that you have an expectation of the management of risk, and we know that you are challenged to know what's happening. You've got your head down. You're trying to do your job. You can't be expected to know everything else that's going on. So we're trying to create tools and processes and procedures to help you make that a more efficient, simpler process. We know that threats, bullying, comments in the workplace and on social media quickly become real-world actions, and we don't want those threats, whether they be weather threats that you can foresee through predictive intelligence or bullying threats or sabotage threats. We don't want to see them affect your community when we know that we might have been able to pick up something. So utilizing the Firestorm social risk monitoring services, you can gain and start creating that intelligence network both through technology and through the people in front of you and back of you and around you in your community to make sure that you have information and can assess and direct responses as need be should a crisis or signs of a crisis occur. We know that while nobody can guarantee you specific results, that if you could know, you would want to. Now, we asked Do you currently use external intelligence to identify potential threats to about 1,000 of our businesses? And really, we can combine that don't know and that know together. And so almost 70% are not using anything to look at the landscape. We really want to encourage that next year when we do this poll again, that number has changed, that more people are in that blue block and using intelligence to move themselves from stage 1, immature liability of an organization, to that stage 4, culture of strategic, clear, concise, proven messaging and action. Because the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. Thank you for joining us today for our Predictive Intelligence session. Again, in about 48 hours, we'll see the brief on our website. Blair, any last words in our thank you?
No, Karen, just thank you for your time and all the great information. And as you mentioned, if anyone has any questions, and I like to reach out to some of the people after the webinars just to make sure they got the brief. And if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call, and we can address any questions or provide any additional information.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's going to conclude our session for today. Thanks again to the NJMEP. Everyone have a great day, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye, Karen. Thank you.